From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might notice things are a little bit different. There are no two ways about it, fellow conspiracy realists. The world is and has been in a pretty strange place, and we have some dark episodes ahead. No spoilers. But today we thought we would take a moment and be a little kinder to ourselves and do something a little bit lighter, if not entirely wholesome. Today we're talking about one of the most well-known tropes in the entire world of conspiracy lore, the tinfoil hat. Like so, I got one now. I got a Mohawk style one, you know. There you go.
It's the only way to go.
It's very fashionable.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was absolutely not thrown together last minute for this episode, but like everybody knows what these things are. We always see them so often in the world of fiction. And our question today, which is also something we explore in our upcoming book, by the way, is what's the deal? How did this become a thing? Why is it stuck around for so long? And perhaps most importantly, does wearing one of these actually do anything other than make the wearer look a little bit loony? To answer these questions, I think we have to start with the stereotype. So here are the facts.
Not too long ago, we mentioned a group of protesters up in Canada who were, or at least the rumor was on social media, that they were using tinfoil hats to prevent some attacks by the local government there. Hopefully you remember this. If not, you can search back through the listener mail and find it. Or maybe it was a strange news. Who knows? But it's something that continues today. And some people, I think, were probably sincerely wearing tinfoil hats in an attempt to block some kind of signals entering their head. But I do know for a fact that others were doing it as a joke. It's like a trope. It's a fictional device, right? We were just talking about the song Weird Al made.
Yes, foil.
So many uses for the stuff. I mean, you can wrap your sandwich in it. Mm-hmm. You can fashion an improvisational pipe out of it. I don't know if anybody ever did that in their teenage years. You know,
no comment.
I always just reheat pizza with it.
You mean in the oven?
Yes.
Yeah.
You reheat your pizza in the oven. That is very posh.
That's the way to go.
Is that
man.
posh?
Pretty posh, man. Usually people just microwave it.
No. Look, I'm going to dispel this. The best way to reheat pizza is if you've got a pan on top of the oven, then you reheat it that way. But I put it inside my convection oven, and I wrap my crust in tinfoil. I also coat my pan in tinfoil. And it really does give you that crispy, delicious cheese that you're looking for.
That's the issue.
It's posh.
Well, that's the issue. Like it's really are you willing to spend a couple extra minutes to get the crispness? I'm sensitive to the texture, right, for the pizza, but also there was a study that showed the science, the chemistry behind why old pizza tastes better, like why you can eat cold pizza for breakfast. It's something to do with the cheese and the tomato sauce sitting together in that environment. Anyway, that maybe is
they sort of fuse.
Episode.
They sort of become one thing, you know, at that point. They're not like separate entities anymore.
And I think there's something about the acidity of the tomato sauce, but we'll have to check in with our pals over at Savor for that one, because I bet they know. As a matter of fact, I've become so lazy with some food questions that I just text Annie and Lauren at times and ask them to explain something about food to me, even though all three of us know that I have access to the internet. So Lauren, Annie, if you're hearing that, sorry, and thank you. We see people who wear tinfoil hats, but overwhelmingly now, like you were pointing out, Matt, they're going to be tropes in fiction. You're not going to see them out in the wild. It's sort of a visual shorthand for writers or directors or actors to indicate the person wearing this peculiar cap is themselves a little bit peculiar. It's the mark of the capital C, capital T conspiracy theorist, maybe a really crazy prepper survivalist, or maybe a hypochondriac, or maybe someone suffering from deep, deep paranoia. And what's funny is these characters, like just as we said this, I'm sure a lot of us listening today immediately pictured something from like Futurama or The Simpsons or The X-Files, etc. The funny thing about these characters is in a lot of shows, they're not always wrong. They may in fact have some insight about some part of the plot or whatever the MacGuffin is or some piece of the story, but that true useful knowledge is a grain of cognitive sand amid this huge mass of unrelated, unproven, and at times contradictory beliefs. Like we got the three of us have been in the past compared to the lone gunman of X-Files fame, and they also, I think they have a couple of tinfoil hat moments. Maybe the most famous is going to be, in the world of fiction right now, is going to be Better Call Saul, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Yeah.
Yep, just started rewatching that in preparation for the new season. I think it's better than Breaking Bad.
I really enjoy it.
Whoa. I'm on season 5. Is that the new one, or is it 6? That's the new one.
No, the new one's not out yet, but the season 5 is the most recent one, and the new one is supposed to be the last one.
Yeah, so season 5 just hit Netflix. Yeah.
Oh, I just started watching it because it said new episodes, and I was like, yes, Bob Odenkirk, let's hang.
Because he had a book coming out called Comedy, Drama, like that. I think it's such a great, all-encapsulating title for his book.
He's a brilliant writer, and he
Absolutely.
actually, I think it's him who wrote a book on humor that is a serious book. It's how to be funny, and it's quite effective.
Wow.
I think that's Bob Odenkirk. I'll check later. But so the logic for these characters and their sartorial preferences, it all hinges on the idea of electromagnetic waves and radiation. And we did talk about this a little bit in the past, but basically, to stop radiation, you need a material that shorts both electric fields and magnetic fields. So in terms of stymieing electric fields, almost any old metal can do an okay job because metal conducts electricity. And despite the name, of course, tinfoil is most often made of aluminum, and aluminum's a good conductor. But to short a magnetic field, you also need a ferromagnetic metal. So that's your iron, your nickel, your cobalt. Iron, is not often used these days. Iron is heavy. It's got some other things going against it, one of which would be rust. But so
that's
the best
the old
choice
Faraday cage thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Just so. So what you would look at in terms of the best choice would probably be something like steel, an alloy of carbon, iron, tiny amounts of other components. Like if you ever have cracked open just a video recorder back in the day, you look inside, you can see there may be a chassis that is constructed of aluminum, but there's a small box behind the coax connector, which is made of steel. And that is to shield things from radiation. That's the logic, at least. There's some MacGyverness about it. There's something, improvisational and even inspiring about the idea of someone saying, I'm going to make my own protection.
Well, it's to shield it from like magnetism as well, right? So it doesn't get erased accidentally. And if I'm not mistaken, like the little kind of cape they put over you at the dentist or the doctor when you're getting an X-ray is made of lead, and that stops that particular type of radiation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it mitigates the exposure level. And when you think of like a tinfoil hat, it's weird to do this episode while I'm actually wearing one, but anyway, we made the
Got to commit to the bit, man.
Well, are you experiencing anything? Are any waves not entering your head that normally would be? Do you feel different?
Who's to say?
I feel slightly less mad. So I gotta get this off because we have more stuff to do. But it's like, what it reminds me of in the spirit of it, putting aside the science for just a second, it reminds me of how in guerrilla warfare and in violent protest in oppressive regimes, people improvise their own sort of devices, whether those are weapons or whether they're improvised gas mask created with, household objects. You can see versions of this, by the way, in video games like Far Cry 6. That has, I think, a lot of improvised material, or it's
Isn't it
based
like
on real
a
stuff.
coffee can filled with charcoal or something like that? Wouldn't that be
There's
one
stuff
way of
like
doing it?
that. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and so we know that this somehow in modern age, the idea of a tinfoil hat became a universally recognized symbol, right? You would show a person a picture of someone wearing a tinfoil hat, and even if they come from vastly different cultures, they would probably immediately associate it with the same things. And that's because this is a surprisingly old idea. It's not something that came about with the wave of UFO sightings in the 1960s. This image of the paranoid loner who puts on the tinfoil cone and they hide away from the all-seeing eye of mass surveillance. It's been around for almost a century. Tinfoil was invented in 1903 or so, and not very much long after, the idea of wearing it as a hat showed up in fiction. And we know this, or at least we learned this, because of a great article by Roisin Kibbard over at Vice.
Yeah, he traces it back to 1927 when Aldous Huxley's half-brother Julian wrote a story called The Tissue Culture King. And that story revolves around a scientist named Haskam who kind of dabbles in mind control technology and eventually realizes that putting on a hat made of foil will block telepathic signals from entering his mind.
But it'll also block them from escaping and getting out. What is he doing? Stunting himself and his own telepathic abilities? I'm just kidding. I don't know. But it does feel like...
Is that from the trailer?
No, I just feel like if you're blocking things from getting in, aren't you blocking things from getting out too, man? No?
That's a good point.
No?
I don't know. No, yeah, but who cares? I don't know,
like my cell phone isn't sending or receiving anything right now, because we... Oh, wait, no, we just debunked that, didn't we? Never mind.
Well, dare to dream, right? It's strange because we can trace where this first appears in fiction. And in the kind of story that you're describing here, Noel, we see that this would be really cool science fiction for its time. The idea stuck around in the modern day. We mentioned Better Call Saul, and in Better Call Saul, the protagonist's older brother is a brilliant lawyer who, as he got on in years, began to believe that he suffered from electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS. And so a lot of the this isn't really a spoiler, but a lot of the early seasons and episodes have this running plot where this guy, who is, again, a brilliant legal mind, has become increasingly isolated from the modern world because he feels that he cannot be around most modern technology. And when he has to go outside or when he has to expose himself to these waves that he feels have damaging health effects, he always hides beneath those emergency foil blankets, the kind of things you'd see in a survival kit, the kind you should definitely have in your car if you're on a road trip.
Excellent portrayal by Michael McKean, who you'll know from all the Christopher Guest movies and Spinal Tap and all of that stuff. He's just fantastic. It's simultaneously funny. He's kind of an ass, but it's also heartbreaking because he is going through this stuff and he fully is experiencing it. But it's one of these things we've talked about in the past that science doesn't exactly acknowledge as being real.
Yes, and we're diving into that later in this episode too. It's an ongoing conversation, right? These characters, again in fiction, are often played for laughs, right? As though they are foolish in their paranoia. But you have to wonder how those so-called kooks of yesteryear would feel about the average person's online social media life today. Maybe they weren't, maybe they were wrong about a lot of stuff, but maybe they weren't wrong about everything, especially when it comes to surveillance. So You have to wonder, though, why this image has such staying power, 1927 to 2022. Well, could it be that it's just a shortcut for sometimes lazy writing, or could it be something else? Could it actually work? We'll pause for a word from our sponsor and figure this out together.